She was just a waitress making minimum wage, and he was the monster everyone in New York feared. But when Emily saw a manager raise his hand against a terrified little girl, she didn't care about the consequences. She stepped in, risking her job and her safety to protect a child she didn't even know. She expected to be fired. She expected to be yelled at. What she didn't expect was for the shadows in the corner of the restaurant to move. She didn't expect the city's most ruthless Mafia don to step into the light, look her in the eyes, and change her life forever. Because that little girl wasn't just a customer, she was the Don's daughter. And nobody touches what belongs to Adrian Volkov. The dinner rush at the Velvet Orchid, one of Manhattan's most pretentious establishments, was in full swing. The air smelled of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and quiet desperation. For Emily Vance, it was hour 9 of a 12-hour double shift. Her feet throbbed in her cheap black non-slip shoes, and the smile plastered on her face was beginning to feel like a mask made of cracking porcelain. "Table 4 needs more wine, Emily. Move it." Martin Thorne, the restaurant manager, barked into her ear as he brushed past. Martin was a petty tyrant in a 3-piece suit. He was the kind of man who skimmed tips from the jar and blamed the staff for his own inventory mistakes. He had slicked back hair that looked like it had been dipped in motor oil and a sneer that permanently etched lines around his mouth. He ran the Velvet Orchid with an iron fist, terrified of the owners but brutal to the staff. "On it, Martin," Emily murmured, grabbing a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. She moved through the dining room with practiced grace, dodging buses and navigating the maze of tables occupied by the city's elite. Politicians, hedge fund managers, and socialites filled the seats, oblivious to the invisible workers keeping their glasses full. But in the far corner, at the most secluded booth, sat a pair that didn't quite fit the loud, boisterous energy of the rest of the room. A little girl, no older than 6, sat alone on one side of the velvet booth. She looked tiny against the dark upholstery, her legs swinging, not quite touching the floor. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Emily's car, but her eyes were wide and anxious. Sitting opposite her was a man obscured by the shadows and a large menu. All Emily could see was a broad chest clad in a bespoke charcoal suit and a wrist adorned with a platinum Patek Philippe watch that glinted in the low light. He radiated a cold, heavy silence that seemed to lower the temperature in a 5-foot radius. Emily had barely dropped off the wine at table 4 when a crash echoed through the restaurant. The chatter stopped. The clinking of silverware ceased. Emily spun around. At the secluded booth, a glass of cranberry juice had tipped over. The red liquid was dripping off the edge of the table, soaking into the pristine white tablecloth and splashing onto the expensive Persian rug beneath. The little girl froze. Her hands hovered over her mouth, her eyes filling with instant, terrified tears. She looked at the man across from her, but before he could react, a shadow descended upon the table. It was Martin. He had been hovering nearby, hoping to impress the VIP guest, and saw the spill as a personal affront. He lunged forward, his face twisting into a mask of rage. "You clumsy little brat," Martin hissed, his voice loud enough to carry across the silent room. He grabbed a napkin and aggressively slammed it onto the table, making the girl flinch violently. "Do you have any idea how much this rug costs? Do you think this is a playground?" The girl shrank back, trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She was mute with fear. "I'm talking to you," Martin shouted, losing control. The stress of the night and his own inflated ego got the better of him. He reached out, his hand grasping the girl's thin upper arm to yank her out of the booth. "Get up! You're making a mess!" That was the moment Emily stopped thinking. She didn't think about her rent, which was 2 weeks late. She didn't think about her sick mother, Martha, who needed medication Emily could barely afford. She didn't think about the fact that jobs were scarce in the city. She dropped the empty tray she was holding. It clattered loudly against a service station and sprinted across the dining room. Just as Martin's fingers dug into the girl's expensive dress, Emily was there. She slapped his hand away with a force that surprised even her. Smack. The sound was sharp and shocking. Martin recoiled, clutching his hand, his eyes bulging. "Don't you dare touch her," Emily growled, positioning herself between the manager and the trembling child. Her chest was heaving, her eyes blazing with a protective fury she usually reserved for her family. "Emily," Martin sputtered, his face turning a shade of purple. "Have you lost your mind? Get out of my way. This child is ruining the aesthetic of the—" "She spilled a drink, Martin. She didn't set the building on fire," Emily shouted back, her voice ringing clear. She turned and crouched down, ignoring the stunned gasps of the diners. She looked at the little girl, whose face was buried in her hands. "Hey, sweetie, it's okay. It's just juice. Look, it's already soaking in. It's not a big deal." The girl peeked through her fingers, tears streaming down her cheeks. Emily smiled, a genuine warm smile that softened her tired features. "My name is Emily. I spill things all the time. Yesterday, I dropped a whole bowl of soup on my shoes. It was way messier than this." The girl let out a tiny, watery hiccup. "You're fired!" Martin screamed, regaining his composure. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. "Get your things and get out, Emily. You assault your manager. You humiliate me in front of high-value guests. You're finished in this town. I'll make sure you never wait tables in New York again." Emily stood up slowly. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold dread of reality. She had just lost her livelihood. But as she looked at Martin, sweaty, red-faced and bullying a child, she didn't regret it. "I'm leaving," Emily said quietly. "But not because you fired me. Because I won't work for a man who bullies children to feel powerful." "Get out!" Martin shrieked, reaching for her arm to physically escort her. "I suggest," a deep, baritone voice cut through the air like a serrated blade, "that you remove your hand from her arm immediately." The voice didn't come from the entrance. It came from the shadowed side of the booth. Martin froze. Emily froze. The man in the charcoal suit slowly stood up. He was tall, imposingly so, standing well over 6'3". His hair was dark, styled impeccably, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. He stepped out of the booth, and the light hit his face. A collective gasp went through the restaurant. Waiters dropped their heads. Some diners looked away, terrified to make eye contact. It was Adrian Volkov, the head of the Volkov Syndicate, the man who owned half the real estate in Manhattan and controlled the shipping docks, the man whose name was whispered in fear in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Martin turned pale, his knees visibly shaking. "Mr. Volkov, sir, I didn't realize." Adrian ignored him completely. He walked around the table, his movements fluid and predatory. He stopped in front of Emily. Emily held her breath. Up close, he was terrifyingly handsome, but the energy radiating off him was pure violence, constrained by a suit. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was low, intimate, yet commanded absolute attention. "Emily," she whispered. "Emily Vance." Adrian looked at her for a long second, then his gaze shifted to his daughter, who was looking at Emily with awe. He looked back at the waitress. "You defended my daughter, Bella," Adrian stated. It wasn't a question. "She was scared," Emily said, her chin lifting slightly. "He was hurting her." Adrian turned his head slowly toward Martin. The movement was mechanical, like a tank turret rotating toward a target. Martin whimpered. "Mr. Volkov, please," Martin stammered, sweat pouring down his face. She was disrespectful. The girl, Bella, she made a mess, and I was just trying to maintain the standards of— "You touched her," Adrian said. His voice was devoid of emotion, which made it infinitely scarier. "You raised your voice at my daughter, and then you tried to lay hands on the woman who protected her." Martin couldn't speak. Adrian pulled a phone from his pocket. He dialed a number and put it to his ear, never breaking eye contact with Martin. "Hello, Arthur?" "Yes. I'm at the Velvet Orchid. By the building. Yes, right now. Contact the owners. Offer them double whatever the market value is. I want the deed in my name within the hour." He hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. The entire restaurant was dead silent. "As of 5 minutes from now," Adrian said, his voice echoing in the stillness, "I own this establishment, and my first act as owner is to terminate your employment." He took a step closer to Martin. "And if I ever hear that you are working in a management position in this city again, or if you ever come within 5 miles of my daughter or Miss Vance, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Yes, Mr. Volkov," Martin squeaked. He turned and ran toward the kitchen, presumably to flee out the back door. Adrian turned back to Emily. The terrifying aura receded slightly, replaced by a look of intense curiosity. "Miss Vance," Adrian said, "you are out of a job." I guess I am," Emily managed to say, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Good," Adrian said, "because I have a proposition for you." The ride in the back of the blacked-out Rolls-Royce Phantom was silent. Emily sat on the plush leather seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. Beside her, Bella, the little girl she had saved, was fast asleep, clutching a stuffed bear that had appeared from a hidden bag. Across from them sat Adrian Volkov. He had a laptop open and was typing furiously, the blue light illuminating the sharp angles of his jaw. Emily stared out the tinted window as the city lights blurred by. "What am I doing?" she thought. "I just got into a car with a Mafia boss. I should be running. I should be calling the police." But calling the police on Adrian Volkov was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol, and besides, he had promised to drive her home. The car slowed to a halt, not in front of her rundown apartment building in Queens, but in front of a towering, wrought-iron gate in the Hudson Valley. They had left the city entirely. Emily started, her voice cracking. "Mr. Volkov, you said you were taking me home." Adrian closed his laptop and looked at her. "I lied." Emily's stomach dropped. Panic surged through her veins. She reached for the door handle. "Relax, Emily," Adrian said, his tone weary. "I am not going to hurt you. If I wanted to hurt you, you would never have made it out of the restaurant." "Then why are we here?" she demanded, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Because Bella likes you," he said simply, gesturing to the sleeping child. "And Bella likes no one." The car drove through the gates and up a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees. At the top of the hill stood a mansion that looked more like a fortress. It was a sprawling estate of grey stone, modern glass, and harsh lines. Security guards with earpieces and visible holsters patrolled the perimeter. The car stopped. A driver opened the door. "Come inside," Adrian commanded. "We need to talk business." Emily followed him, mostly because she had no way of leaving. They entered a foyer that was larger than her entire apartment complex. A grand staircase swept up to the second floor, and a crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting prisms of light on the marble floor. A stern-looking woman in a housekeeper's uniform appeared. "Mr. Volkov, "You're home early." "Take Bella to bed, Mrs. Higgins," Adrian said. He gently lifted his sleeping daughter and passed her to the housekeeper. For a brief second, as he held the child, Emily saw a flicker of softness in his eyes, a stark contrast to the cold killer she had seen at the restaurant. Once Bella was gone, Adrian walked into a study, motioning for Emily to follow. The room was lined with books and smelled of leather and whiskey. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and slid one across the mahogany desk toward her. "Sit." Emily sat. She didn't touch the drink. "I looked into you, Emily Vance," Adrian began, leaning back in his chair. "In the car?" Emily asked, shocked. "My team is efficient. You are 24 years old. You dropped out of nursing school 2 years ago. You live in a studio apartment in Queens with your mother, Martha Vance, who was diagnosed with congestive heart failure 6 months ago. Her surgery is scheduled for next month, but your insurance denied the claim. You need $75,000 or she dies." Emily felt like she had been punched in the gut. The air left her lungs. How do you know that?" "I know everything," Adrian said. "You are drowning in debt. You work double shifts at that restaurant, and you pick up cleaning gigs on the weekends. You are exhausted, desperate, and running out of time." Tears stung Emily's eyes. It was cruel to have her life laid out like an autopsy report. "Is this why you brought me here? To mock me?" "No," Adrian said. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "I brought you here to offer you a solution." "What kind of solution?" Emily asked warily. "I need a nanny," Adrian said. Emily blinked. "A nanny?" "Bella is difficult," Adrian explained, running a hand through his hair. "She hasn't spoken a word since her mother died 2 years ago. She is traumatized. She screams at night. She attacks the staff. She trusts no one. I have hired the best child psychologists, the most expensive nannies from London and Paris. She chases them all away within a week." He paused, his eyes locking onto Emily's. "But tonight, when that manager grabbed her, she didn't pull away from you. When you spoke to her, she stopped crying. She slept in the car next to you without a nightmare. That hasn't happened in years." "I'm not a nanny," Emily said. "I was studying to be a nurse." "Even better," Adrian countered. "You have medical training, you have patience, and most importantly, you have a spine. I saw you stand up to Martin. You have a protective instinct. That is what my daughter needs. Not some diploma-waving educator, but a protector." "I can't just move here," Emily shook her head. "My mom?" "Your mother will be transferred to Mount Sinai Hospital in the morning," Adrian interrupted. "She will receive the surgery she needs. I will pay for the best cardiac surgeon in the country. I will cover her recovery, her medication, and I will hire a private nurse to watch her 24/7 while you are here." Emily's mouth fell open. You would do that?" "That is the signing bonus," Adrian said coolly. "Your salary will be $10,000 a month. You will live here. You will be on call for Bella whenever she needs you. But there are rules." Emily swallowed hard. "What rules?" Adrian's expression darkened. The shadows seemed to close in around him again. "Rule number 1. You do not ask about my business. You will see people come and go. You will see guns. You might see blood. You see nothing. You hear nothing. Rule number 2. You never leave the estate without a security escort. And rule number 3, Adrian stood up, walking around the desk until he was inches from her. He towered over her, his scent of sandalwood and danger filling her senses. You never ever betray me. Betrayal is the only sin I do not forgive. He held out a hand. It was large, calloused, and strong. Do we have a deal, Miss Vance? Emily looked at his hand. She thought of her mother, coughing in their damp apartment, counting out pills to make them last longer. She thought of Martin and the hopeless grind of the restaurant. She looked up into Adrian Volkov's steel-grey eyes. She knew she was making a deal with the devil. She knew this house was dangerous. But for her mother, and for the sad little girl with the big eyes, she would walk into hell. She stood up and took his hand. Deal. The first week at the Volkov estate was less like a new job and more like entering a high-security prison disguised as a palace. Emily's room was magnificent. A suite, really, with a balcony overlooking the sprawling, manicured gardens and the dense forest beyond. The bedsheets were made of Egyptian cotton that felt like silk against her skin, a stark contrast to the scratchy polyester she was used to in Queens, but the luxury couldn't mask the underlying tension that vibrated through the hallways. Every door had a keypad. Every corridor had a camera with a blinking red light watching her every move. The staff were mostly burly men in suits who didn't speak, their eyes scanning the perimeter constantly. Even the gardener wore an earpiece. Emily's primary challenge, however, wasn't the security. It was Mrs. Higgins and the silence of the nursery. "You are the 5th nanny in 6 months," Mrs. Higgins said on the second morning, her hands busy polishing silver that was already gleaming. She didn't look up. The last one, Miss Clare, left in tears because Bella threw a porcelain doll at her head. The one before that, a specialist from Switzerland, quit because she said the house had bad energy. "I give you 2 weeks. "I don't scare easily," Emily replied, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "And I really need this job. So, Miss Clare and the Swiss lady can keep their opinions. Where is Bella?" "In her room. She hasn't come out for breakfast. She never does." Emily walked up the grand staircase, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. She reached Bella's door and knocked gently. No answer. She pushed the door open. The room was large but dim. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the morning sun. Bella was sitting in the middle of the floor, surrounded by a fortress of pillows, staring blankly at a wall. "Good morning," Emily said softly, stepping inside. Bella didn't flinch. She didn't look up. Emily walked over to the windows. "It's a beautiful day, Bella. The sun is actually shining. In New York, that's a miracle, right?" She pulled the curtains back. Light flooded the room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Bella hissed, a sharp, animalistic sound, and threw a pillow at the window. Then she curled into a tighter ball, burying her face in her knees. Emily didn't retreat. She didn't scold. Instead, she sat down on the floor, about 5 feet away from the pillow fortress. She didn't look at Bella. She pulled a sketchbook and a charcoal pencil from her pocket, items she had brought from home. "I used to want to be an artist before I went to nursing school," Emily said to the room at large. "My mum couldn't afford paints, so I used charcoal. It's messy. I love messy." She began to sketch. She drew the old oak tree outside the window. She drew the squirrel she had seen running along the fence. She sketched for 20 minutes in silence. Slowly, imperceptibly, Bella's head lifted. The little girl shifted. She peeked over the top of a pillow. Emily pretended not to notice. She kept sketching, deliberately making a mistake. She drew the squirrel with a tail that looked like a rabbit's ear. "Oops," Emily muttered. "That looks silly." Bella crawled a few inches closer. Her eyes were glued to the paper. Emily slid the sketchbook and a spare pencil across the floor, halfway between them. Then she turned her back to Bella and looked out the window, humming a quiet tune. She waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Then she heard the scratch of charcoal on paper. Emily smiled at the window but didn't turn around. She let Bella have her space. For the next hour, they sat in companionable silence, drawing. When Emily finally turned around, she saw that Bella had drawn a picture of a bear, dark, jagged lines, fierce and angry. But next to the bear, she had drawn a small, wobbly flower. It was a start. Later that afternoon, Emily was walking down the main hallway toward the kitchen to get Bella a snack. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a wall of muscle. It was one of the guards, a man named Dante. He wasn't alone. Adrian Volkov was standing by the library door, but he wasn't the calm, suited businessman she had met at the restaurant. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie undone, and his hands were stained with something red. Emily froze. Her nurse training kicked in before her fear. She looked at his hands. It wasn't paint. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Adrian looked up, his eyes cold and dangerous. Behind him, through the crack in the library door, Emily saw two men tied to chairs. Their faces were bruised. One of them was unconscious. "Rule number 1, Emily," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You see nothing." Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She took a step back. I was just getting juice for Bella." "Go back to the nursery," Adrian commanded. "Now." "Your hand," Emily insisted, pointing to a deep gash across his knuckles. "It's deep. It needs stitches. If it gets infected, you'll lose dexterity in your fingers." Adrian looked at his hand, then back at her. He seemed baffled by her audacity. He had just indirectly threatened her, and she was giving him medical advice. "I have a doctor on payroll," he said dismissively. "He's not here," Emily countered. "And that wound is still bleeding. I have a first aid kit in my bag. Let me clean it." Dante, the guard, looked at Adrian, waiting for the order to remove her. Adrian stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw the stubborn tilt of her chin. 5 minutes, Adrian said. "In the kitchen. Dante, close the library door." In the sterile, industrial-sized kitchen, Emily worked quickly. She ran Adrian's hand under cold water, the blood swirling down the drain. He didn't flinch as she poured antiseptic over the cut, though she knew it must have stung like fire. "You have steady hands," Adrian commented, watching her work. He was sitting on a bar stool, towering over her. "Nursing school," she muttered, wrapping a bandage efficiently around his knuckles. "Why are you doing this, Adrian? Why do you have men tied up in your library?" "Emily," he warned, his voice hardening. I know. Rule number 1," she sighed, tying the knot. "But you have a daughter upstairs, a daughter who is terrified of the world. Does she know what you do?" "She knows I protect her," Adrian said sharply. "She knows that everything I do to keep the wolves away from this door." "Sometimes," Emily said, looking him in the eye, "the wolf is already inside the house." Adrian pulled his hand back. The air crackled with tension. He leaned in close, his face inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. "Do not mistake my tolerance for weakness, Emily. You are here because Bella likes you. Do not push your luck." "I'm not pushing my luck," Emily whispered. I'm worried about her. She drew a picture today. A bear and a flower. She's the flower, Adrian. You're the bear." Adrian flinched as if she had slapped him. He stood up abruptly, the movement knocking the bar stool back. "Keep her safe," he rasped, turning his back on her. "That is your only job." He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Emily alone with the humming of the refrigerator and the lingering scent of his cologne and copper blood. She realized then that Adrian Volkov wasn't just a monster. He was a man tormented by his own nature, trapped in a cage of his own making, and she was locked in there with him. 3 weeks passed. The rhythm of the house began to shift. Bella was still mute, but she was no longer a ghost. She followed Emily around the house like a shadow. They baked cookies that turned out rock hard. They planted tulips in the garden, under the watchful eye of 3 guards, and they read books in the library. When Adrian wasn't using it for meetings, Emily's mother, Martha, had successfully undergone surgery. Emily received a video call from her mum, looking pale but alive, resting in a private room at Mount Sinai that looked more like a hotel suite. Seeing her mother smile for the first time in years made the fear of living in the Volkov mansion worth it. One Tuesday, the atmosphere in the house changed. The guards were tighter. The phone lines were busy. Adrian had been locked in his office since dawn. "We need to go out," Emily decided. She found Dante in the hallway. "Bella needs fresh air, real fresh air. Not just the backyard." "Mr. Volkov gave orders. No leaving the estate," Dante grunted. "The estate includes the private park down the road, doesn't it?" Emily asked. "It's enclosed. It belongs to the Volkovs. Bella has been staring at the same 4 walls for a month. She's getting restless." Dante hesitated, then touched his earpiece. He muttered something, listened, and then nodded. "Fine. But we take the armored SUV, and I bring 3 men." The private park was a secluded stretch of woodland and a playground that looked like it hadn't been used in years. It was surrounded by a 12-foot fence. Emily pushed Bella on the swing. For the first time, she heard a sound from the girl that wasn't a cry or a hiss. It was a giggle. A rusty, quiet giggle, but a giggle nonetheless. Emily beamed. "Higher!" Bella nodded vigorously. Emily pushed her higher, laughing as Bella's hair flew in the wind. The guards stood at the perimeter, smoking cigarettes, looking bored. They felt safe here. It was Volkov territory. That was their mistake. Emily walked over to the bench to grab Bella's water bottle. As she bent down, she noticed a reflection. A glint of light from the dense tree line just outside the fence. It wasn't the sun reflecting off a leaf. It was too steady, too round. Scope. The word flashed in Emily's mind, a relic from a movie or a book, but the instinct was primal. She didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She moved. "Bella, get down!" Emily sprinted toward the swings. A crack echoed through the air, suppressed but audible. Dirt exploded next to Bella's shoe. Emily threw herself at the child, tackling her off the swing and into the mulch, just as a second bullet pinged off the metal chain where Bella's head had been a second ago. "Contact! Contact north perimeter!" Dante roared, pulling his weapon. Chaos erupted. The guards opened fire toward the trees. Dante sprinted toward Emily and Bella, grabbing them by their jackets and dragging them behind the concrete structure of the slide. Bella was screaming now, a silent, open-mouthed scream of pure terror. Emily held her tight, shielding the girl's body with her own. "It's okay, I've got you! I've got you!" Emily chanted, though she was shaking violently. They were bundled into the SUV seconds later. Tires screeched as they tore out of the park, speeding back toward the mansion. When they arrived, the gates were already open. Adrian was standing on the steps. He looked like the god of war. He had a rifle in one hand, and his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The car barely stopped before Adrian ripped the door open. He didn't look at Dante. He looked straight at Bella. Seeing she was unharmed, he pulled her into his arms, crushing her to his chest. He buried his face in her hair, breathing raggedly. Then he looked at Emily. She was sitting in the back seat, her knees scraped and bleeding from the tackle, her shirt torn. She was pale, shocked, but alive. "Get them inside," Adrian barked at Mrs. Higgins, who had rushed out. Take Bella to the safe room. Lock it." Once Bella was gone, Adrian turned on Dante. "How?" Adrian asked. His voice was quiet, which was terrifying. "How did a shooter get within range of my daughter on my land?" "Boss, it was a pro," Dante stammered, looking at the ground. "Suppressed rifle, long range. We didn't see him until the nanny saw him," Adrian finished. He stepped closer to Dante. "A waitress from Queens has better situational awareness than my head of security." "Adrian," Emily said, stepping out of the car. Her legs felt like jelly. "Don't hurt him. They got us out." Adrian turned to her. He marched over, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was bruising. He scanned her frantically. "Are you hit? Is there blood?" "I'm fine," Emily said breathlessly. "Just scrapes." "You could have been killed," he roared, shaking her slightly. "You stupid, reckless woman. You threw yourself in front of a bullet." "I was protecting her," Emily shouted back, adrenaline overriding her fear of him. "That's my job. That's what you hired me for." "I didn't hire you to die," Adrian bellowed. They stared at each other, chests heaving. The violence of the moment hung between them, heavy and electric. "Who was it?" Emily asked, her voice dropping. Adrian let go of her shoulders and turned away, running a hand over his face. "Lucaro Moretti." The name hung in the air like a curse. "The Moretti family has been trying to take the ports for years," Adrian said, his voice devoid of emotion now. "Lucaro. He doesn't have boundaries. He doesn't care about families. He sent a message today. He tried to take the one thing that matters to me." He turned back to Emily. The anger was gone, replaced by a grim resolve. "You can't stay here," Adrian said. Emily blinked. "What? You're firing me?" "I'm trying to save your life," Adrian said. "Today was a warning. Next time they won't miss. I will give you $1 million. Take your mother. Go to Europe. Disappear. You've done enough. You saved her life today. I am in your debt." Emily looked at the mansion. She thought of Bella, terrified in the safe room. She thought of the little girl who had just started to giggle. If Emily left, Bella would retreat back into the darkness. She would be alone in this cold fortress, with a father who loved her, but didn't know how to reach her. Emily squared her shoulders. "No." Adrian stared at her. "Excuse me." "I said no," Emily said firmly. "I'm not leaving. Bella needs me. And I'm not running away from a bully." I stood up to Martin. "I'll stand up to this Lucaro guy, too." "This isn't a restaurant manager, Emily," Adrian shouted. "This is the Mafia. They kill people." "Then you better teach me how to shoot," Emily said, crossing her arms. Adrian looked at her for a long time. Silence stretched over the driveway. Slowly, a look of grudging respect, and something else, something hotter, dawned in his eyes. "You're insane," Adrian muttered. "I'm the nanny," Emily corrected. "Fine," Adrian said. "You stay. But the rules have changed." "How?" "Rule number 4, Adrian said, stepping close again, his voice low and husky. "You stay by my side, at all times. If you want to be in this war, Emily, you're going to be on the front lines with me." The following weeks were a blur of gunpowder and silk. True to his word, Adrian Volkov did not send Emily away. Instead, he brought her into the fold. Mornings were for Bella. Emily had made a breakthrough. They were now baking edible cookies, and Bella had started humming along to the radio. But afternoons were for Adrian. In the basement of the mansion lay a state-of-the-art shooting range and gym. This was where Emily's education began. "Stance wider," Adrian instructed, tapping the inside of her ankle with his boot. "You are too stiff. If the gun kicks, you will fall." Emily gritted her teeth, adjusting her feet. She held the Glock 19, her arms trembling slightly from the weight. It wasn't heavy, but holding it aimed for 20 minutes was exhausting. "I'm tired, Adrian." "Fatigue is when mistakes happen," he said mercilessly. "Again." He stood behind her, his chest brushing against her back. The heat radiating from him was distracting. He reached around, his large hands covering hers to correct her grip. "Relax your shoulders," he whispered, his breath ghosting over her ear. "Breathe out as you squeeze. Don't pull. Squeeze." Emily's heart rate spiked, and it wasn't because of the weapon. His proximity was intoxicating. He smelled of gun oil and expensive soap. She took a breath, centered the sight on the paper target, and fired. Bang! Center mass. "Better," Adrian murmured, stepping back. The loss of his warmth was immediate and jarring. He walked around to face her. "You have a natural instinct for this. It's unsettling." "I grew up in Queens," Emily joked weakly, lowering the gun. "I've seen things." "Not like this," Adrian said, his face serious. "Next week is the Celestial Gala. It is the one night a year where the 5 families of New York meet under a truce. No weapons, no bloodshed, just politics. And you're going? I have to. Lucaro Moretti will be there. If I don't show, it looks like weakness. It looks like I am afraid of his attack on my daughter." "Okay," Emily nodded. "So you go, and I stay here with Bella and the fortress." "No," Adrian said. He looked at her, his gaze intense. "You are coming with me." Emily's eyes widened. "What? Why? I'm the nanny." "Not anymore," Adrian said. "To the outside world, nobody knows who you are yet. If you stay here, you are a target. If you come with me, you are by my side where I can see you. Besides," he paused, looking almost uncomfortable. "I need someone I trust to watch my back. I do not trust my lieutenants right now, not after the breach at the park." You trust me?" Emily asked softly. Adrian didn't answer with words. He walked over to a table and picked up a velvet box. "This arrived for you." Emily opened it. Inside sat a dress that looked like it was woven from starlight. It was a deep, midnight blue silk, backless, with a slit that went up to the thigh. Beside it lay a diamond choker that likely cost more than her mother's entire lifespan of earnings. It's too much," Emily whispered. "It is armor," Adrian corrected. "At the gala, appearance is everything. You need to look like you belong to me. Like you are untouchable." "Belong to you?" Emily repeated, a blush rising to her cheeks. Adrian stepped closer, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. "For the night, Emily, you will be my partner, my equal. And if anyone looks at you the wrong way," his eyes darkened, "they will answer to me." The night before the gala, a thunderstorm rolled over the Hudson Valley. Bella was terrified of thunder. Emily spent hours in the nursery, building a blanket fort and reading stories by flashlight until the little girl finally fell asleep. When Emily emerged, the house was dark. She walked down to the kitchen for water and found Adrian standing by the large glass doors, watching the lightning tear the sky apart. He held a glass of whiskey, his knuckles white. "She used to love the rain," Adrian said without turning around. He knew it was her. "Bella?" "No, her mother. Victoria." It was the first time he had spoken her name. Emily stayed quiet, leaning against the island counter. "Victoria was soft," Adrian said, his voice hollow. "She was kind. She hated this life. She hated the guns, the guards. She begged me to leave it. I told her I couldn't. I told her I had to be the king to keep her safe." He turned to look at Emily, his eyes haunted. "I was wrong. Being the king just made her a bigger target. They put a bomb in her car, Emily. 2 years ago. Emily gasped softly. Oh, Adrian. I wasn't there, he whispered. I was at a meeting about territory. I chose power over her, and she paid the price. That is why Bella doesn't speak. She was in the back seat. She saw it happen. By some miracle, the blast shield saved her. But she saw her mother. He couldn't finish. Emily crossed the room. She didn't think. She just acted on the instinct that had driven her since the moment they met. She reached out and took his hand, the hand that had held the gun, the hand that had beaten men, the hand that now trembled. You are not that man anymore, Emily said fiercely. You are the man who stopped the world for his daughter. You are the man who took in a stranger to protect her. You aren't just a king, Adrian. You're a father. Adrian looked down at their joined hands. Then he looked at her lips. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the electricity of the storm outside and the fire between them. He pulled her closer. Emily didn't resist. Her hands moved up his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart. Emily, he groaned, I am dangerous. You should run from me. I told you, she whispered, rising on her tiptoes. I don't scare easily. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was desperate, hungry, and full of the pent-up emotion of the last month. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her flush against him. Emily kissed him back with equal force, tasting the whiskey and the sorrow on his tongue. For a moment, in the dark kitchen during a thunderstorm, the Mafia Don and the Waitress were just a man and a woman, clinging to each other in a world trying to tear them apart. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was transformed into a gilded cage. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, and the room was filled with the most powerful criminals in the Western Hemisphere. Men in tuxedos discussed money laundering over champagne. Women in couture gowns laughed about politicians they had bribed. When Adrian Volkov entered, the room went quiet. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, tailored to conceal the holster under his arm. But it was the woman on his arm that drew every eye. Emily looked regal. The midnight blue dress hugged her curves, the diamonds at her throat catching the light. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck. She held her head high, her face a mask of cool indifference, just as Adrian had taught her. Breathe, Adrian murmured, his hand warm on the small of her back. They are sharks. Do not bleed. I'm okay, Emily whispered back, though her stomach was doing somersaults. They moved through the crowd. Adrian was greeted with nods of respect and fear. He introduced Emily simply as Emily, offering no last name, no explanation. The mystery only added to her allure. Volkov! The voice was loud, boisterous, and fake. A man separated himself from a group near the bar. He was shorter than Adrian, with a smile that showed too many teeth and eyes that looked like dead fish. Lucaro, Adrian acknowledged, his voice dropping 10 degrees. Lucaro Moretti spread his arms. I didn't think you'd come. After, well, you know, troubles at home. It was a veiled reference to the assassination attempt. Emily felt Adrian's muscles coil beneath his suit jacket. My home is a fortress, Lucaro, Adrian said smoothly. Pests are easily exterminated. Lucaro's smile twitched. His eyes slid to Emily. He looked her up and down in a way that made her want to take a shower. And who is this lovely creature? A new toy, Adrian. You usually prefer them quieter. I am not a toy, Emily said. Her voice was clear, cutting through the tension. She looked Lucaro dead in the eye. And I would be careful who you call a pest, Mr. Moretti. Pests have a nasty habit of carrying diseases that kill their hosts. Lucaro blinked, surprised by her boldness. Then he laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Feisty. I like that. Enjoy the party, Lucaro, Adrian said, steering Emily away before he killed the man right there on the dance floor. You did good, Adrian whispered in her ear as they moved to the edge of the room. But don't provoke him too much. He is unhinged. He ordered the hit on Bella, Emily hissed. I wanted to stab him with a fork. Patience, Adrian said. Tonight is about information. I need to know who his supplier is. Once I cut off his supply, he is finished. Adrian left her briefly to speak with an associate from the Russian Bratva. Emily stood by a marble pillar, sipping sparkling water, scanning the room. She was watching for threats, for anything out of place. Champagne, miss? A waiter appeared at her elbow, holding a silver tray. He kept his head down. No, thank you, Emily said, not looking at him. Are you sure? The waiter asked. It's a very expensive vintage, the Velvet Orchid Special. Emily froze. The blood drained from her face. She knew that voice. She turned slowly. The waiter looked up. It was Martin, the manager from the restaurant. But he looked different. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He wore a cheap waiter's uniform that was too big for him. Martin, Emily breathed. You, Martin spat, his voice a low tremble. Look at you, wearing diamonds, rubbing shoulders with murderers, while I lost everything. I lost my job, my reputation, my apartment. I live in a shelter because of you. You did that to yourself, Emily said, backing away. You hurt a child. I was doing my job, Martin hissed, stepping closer, blocking her path. He reached into his jacket pocket. And now I'm going to get paid. Moretti promised me 50 grand if I caused a scene, if I took something from Volkov. Emily saw the glint of metal. It wasn't a gun. It was a serrated steak knife, stolen from the kitchen. Martin, don't, Emily warned, holding up her hands. Security is everywhere. They're watching the doors, Martin sneered. They aren't watching the help. Nobody watches the help. That's what you used to be, right? Nobody. He lunged. Emily didn't scream. She flashed back to the basement. Stance. Leverage. As Martin thrust the knife toward her stomach, Emily sidestepped. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, twisting his arm back with the force of her entire body weight. Crack! Martin screamed as his wrist snapped. The knife clattered to the floor, but Martin was desperate. He swung his other fist, catching Emily on the cheekbone. The force knocked her back into the waiter passing by with a tray of crystal glasses. Crash! The sound of shattering glass silenced the orchestra. The entire ballroom turned. Martin scrambled for the knife on the floor. I'll kill you! I'll kill you both! Emily was on the ground, dazed, glass shards cutting into her palms. She saw Martin raise the knife again. Bang! A single shot rang out. Martin froze. A red bloom appeared on his shoulder. He dropped the knife and collapsed, wailing. Emily looked up. Adrian stood 10 feet away, a smoking pistol in his hand. He had broken the truce. He had fired a weapon at the gala. The room erupted into chaos, screams, shouting, security guards drawing weapons. Adrian! Emily cried out. Adrian didn't look at the crowd. He sprinted to her, hauling her up from the glass. Are you hurt? I'm fine. It's Martin. I know, Adrian said grimly. He looked around. The truce was over. The 5 families were drawing lines. Moretti was across the room, smiling. This was his trap. He had used a pawn to force Adrian to break the rules. Now, Adrian was the aggressor. Every gun in the room was authorized to turn on him. We have to go, Adrian said, gripping her arm. Now! Exits are blocked! Dante's voice crackled in Adrian's earpiece, loud enough for Emily to hear. Moretti's men have the lobby. We're trapped. Adrian looked at Emily. His eyes were fierce, burning with intensity. "Do you trust me?" he asked again. "Yes," Emily said without hesitation. "Then hold on." Adrian grabbed a heavy chair and hurled it through the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Central Park. Cold night air rushed in. "We are on the second floor." "Jump!" Adrian commanded. Emily didn't look down. She took his hand, and together they leaped out of the gilded cage and into the darkness below. They hit the pavement hard, scrambling into the back of Arthur's waiting sedan. But their relief was shattered by a single vibration of Adrian's phone. He looked at the screen, and his face turned to stone. "Checkmate. I have her." "The gala was a distraction," Adrian rasped, showing Emily the text. "Lucaro is at the house. He has Bella." The drive back to the Hudson Valley was a blur of terrifying speed. When they arrived, the estate gates hung off their hinges, and the mansion stood dark, the power cut. They moved through the wrecked foyer like ghosts, heartbeats thundering against their ribs. Upstairs, a chilling voice drifted from the nursery. "Daddy's home," Lucaro Moretti sneered. They burst into the room. The nursery was trashed. Lucaro sat in the center, a silver handgun pressed casually against a trembling Bella. "I was just telling her how you killed my brother, Adrian." Lucaro smiled, his eyes dead and cold. "Take me." Adrian stepped forward, his hands raised in surrender. "Let the girl go, and I am yours." "I'll take you both," Lucaro laughed. "But first I think the brat needs a lesson." He raised his hand to strike the child. Suddenly, a sound pierced the air, a sound absent for 2 years. "No!" Bella screamed, her voice rusty but furious, standing up with her fists clenched. "Leave her alone." Lucaro froze, stunned that the mute girl had spoken. That split second of hesitation was all Emily needed. She didn't have a gun, but she saw something on the floor, a charcoal pencil, sharpened to a lethal point for fine details. Emily lunged. She drove the pencil into the soft spot of Lucaro's neck with all the force of her maternal instinct. Lucaro gurgled, dropping the gun and clutching his throat. He stumbled back and collapsed into the debris of the pillow fort, unconscious. Adrian kicked the weapon away, but Emily was already on her knees, pulling Bella into a crushing hug. "You spoke," Emily sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "He hurt you," Bella croaked, clinging to her. Adrian dropped beside them, wrapping his massive arms around both women. The King of New York shook with relief, burying his face in their hair. He pulled back to look at Emily, blood on her lip, dress torn, fire in her eyes. "You took down a Don with a pencil," he murmured in awe. "I told you," Emily whispered, leaning into his touch. "Art is messy." Adrian kissed her fiercely, a promise sealed in blood and survival. "You are no nanny, Emily Vance," he whispered against her lips. "You are the queen of this house, and God help anyone who tries to touch what is ours." From spilling juice in a high-end restaurant to taking down a Mafia Don with a charcoal pencil, Emily Vance's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. She didn't just find a job, she found a family worth fighting for, and a love that was as dangerous as it was undeniable. Adrian Volkov, the monster in the expensive suit, found the one thing he thought he had lost forever: redemption. And little Bella found her voice again, secure in the knowledge that she was protected, not just by a king, but by a queen who would burn down the world to keep her safe. Thank you so much for watching this Mafia romance saga. If you enjoyed the twists, the drama, and the epic romance of Adrian and Emily, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel out. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow romance lovers, and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another thrilling story. Let me know in the comments what kind of story you want to hear next. Until then, stay safe out there.